has the famous lines in chapter 2, "I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, to see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not when I came to die, discover that I had not lived." Those are very beautiful words, and notice that some of the words in that line are deliberately and essential, two words that have a lot of meaning to minimalists today that we're going to explore today. When we use the word deliberately today in terms of minimalism, it means that you are making a conscious choice what to do, what to leave out, what to own, what not to own, and therefore spend the rest of your resources on more meaningful things in life because you don't have all that clutter going on. Okay, every year society is moving faster and faster, and we need, frankly, to find a way out of it because the ads are following us now. Every time we pick up our devices, there can be a notification, there can be some kind of ad popping up, and Stoicism and minimalism both give us ways to deal with this. First of all, Stoicism, as we know, allows us to slow down and think more clearly, and to find the smooth path in life if we apply enough Stoic principles. Minimalism, on the other hand, is very similar. It helps us avoid the excesses of modern-day society and not just do more with less, but to enjoy life more. Now, there are 4 branches of minimalism. If you do some Googling on the internet, you'll quickly find out that minimalism has a branch in architecture and art. We're not going to be talking about that today, but we're going to talk a little bit about cooking in minimalism and mostly about how to live simply or simply living. These are the areas that I have found are common concepts between Stoicism and minimalism. For example, if we talk about the first one, controlling desires, we know from reading Marcus Aurelius that he tells us we have the power to control our desires. And in terms of minimalism, they tell us something a little bit, it's nuanced, it's a little bit different, that if we have less things that we desire, we can then choose other things more. In other words, if I don't have too many things crowding my schedule, I can choose to set aside a half an hour a day for something that maybe I've been meaning to do, something that is more fulfilling in life. Topics like self-reliance and consistent living, we know what all the ancient Stoics talked about that is they felt that living according to nature and living a consistent life is a much better path to virtue. And in terms of minimalism, it's a similar idea because if we're not so wrapped up with all the directions that society is pulling us in, you know, that I need to go shopping, I need to buy this, or maybe my iPhone is not the latest model, I need to now spend time and resources getting the next model. If I'm pulled in all those directions, I can't really live consistently. Okay, now, the topic of money often comes up in minimalism. How do we regard money? Is it good or bad? I was going to play you a video on here, and this is turning out to be my Stoic exam because the video will not play. So instead, I will sum up what the video was about. It was Joshua Milburn. He's one of the minimalist bloggers on the internet. And he describes that it's not that greed of money or wanting money is bad because we all have bills to pay. We all need some things in our life and we need to purchase them. But it's that if we seek money simply for money's sake, that's where our desire and our greed are out of control. And if we're only seeking money in life, then we're overlooking our friends and our family, people we should be spending time with. So minimalism becomes a series of priorities or decisions. In terms of money, if we spend our money more wisely, we can redirect it to new goals. In terms of possessions, we need to remember that they don't own us. Okay, we own the possessions, and only it should be in terms of useful possessions. In terms of our schedule, a lot of people tell me, how do I manage my time better? Well, if you don't automatically say yes to every meeting that you get asked to, you will have more time. You will be more choosy about the meetings that you take. and then you'll have time left over for personal improvement. And in terms of vacations or learning things by traveling, don't just make a bucket list. It's time to actually act on that. Now, these are two books that I highly recommend. The one on the left is, well, it's not available at Amazon.com, but it is one of the early editions of Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. And we study it today because the words, the language in that volume speak to us very well today about controlling our desires, avoiding upset. And on the right, of course, we have Walden that I read a quote from earlier. That one is seen as a minimalist volume because of how sparingly Thoreau wrote of his living 2 years, 2 months in a cabin at Walden Pond. And one interesting side note that I've observed is Marcus Aurelius wrote his as a diary, and he never intended to publish it. But Walden, on the other hand, was a diary of sorts, but he meant to publish it because Thoreau and his friend Emerson at the time were promoting transcendentalism, and this was going to be the next volume to explain it. Okay, now here I have a letter from Seneca. This comes from letter 72, and I think that this is very appropriate for what we have going on today. This was, of course, written like in the 1st century. Listen to this. Attalus used to employ the following simile. Did you ever see a dog snapping with wide open jaws at bits of bread or meat which his master tosses to him? Whatever he catches, he straightway swallows whole and always opens his jaws in the hope of something more. So it is with ourselves. We stand expectant, and whatever fortune has thrown at us, we forthwith bolt, without any real pleasure, and then stand alert and frantic for something else to snatch. But it is not so with the wise man. He is satisfied. Imagine if we could live like this author did, or like Thoreau, that we didn't act on every ad that pops up. We didn't click everything that comes up in our social media. We're more true to ourselves. All right, now this is the modern book, which is very popular with minimalists. It's called Essential by Joshua and Ryan. And I have distilled this book down for this lecture into one slide to talk about their goals, which is detaching and decluttering, not just decluttering your house, but realizing that you can detach from your possessions, almost in a Buddhist sense. Make room in your life for more important things, stepping outside of cultural boundaries. That has echoes of that, I think Epictetus told us. Remember, we will be ridiculed for becoming Stoics or philosophers. And have more experiences, growth, passion, and tranquility, because we're leaving more time in that for our lives. I'm going to read to you from page 1 in chapter 1. This is a very poignant description of how Joshua and Ryan are summing up our society today. There's a shopping mall in San Diego that used to be a prison. Restored, repurposed, and redecorated, it's hard to imagine this place once imprisoned hundreds of inmates. One might argue, however, it's a different kind of prison now, a voluntary incarceration, caged by the invisible walls of consumption. This might sound hyperbolic, but it's an apt analogy. Consumption isn't the problem. Compulsory consumption is. We've trapped ourselves by thinking consumerism will make us happy, by buying crap we don't need or will somehow make us whole. We've gotten good at fooling ourselves, too. We've over-decorated the jailhouse walls. We've built around ourselves, and we've made ourselves so comfortable that we're terrified to leave. But it's a prison cell with a view. It's still a prison cell. So that's something to think about. Okay, here's a book that actually I heard mentioned in the atrium earlier today. This book tells us that our society is highly connected. We already know that part, but because we're highly connected and we're receiving these interruptions all the time, we now become interrupted more. This leads to something called attention residue, where if I'm, let's say, working at the office and something dings and I turn to do something different, I still have the last task on my mind a little bit or somewhat. And that residue, that attention residue, is now causing me to work slower on this new project because I'm still thinking about the old one. So we can fix this with Stoic focus, which comes from using our faculties, and the minimalist idea of being present. Here's the cooking page that I promised you earlier. Minimalist cooking has three main concepts to it. The first is that you can cook delicious meals with fewer ingredients. You don't have to have a long grocery list. Secondly, you can use seasonal items that only come up different times of the year. That, as most of you, if you've read about diet, you know that changing your diet through the year is actually a healthy thing because your body is not getting the same things repeatedly. And also, not necessarily vegan, but less meat is a healthier choice also. Okay, now this book I found a little disturbing to read because it talks about a world deluged with irrelevant information. Clarity becomes our power. How can we stay focused on what is meaningful or fulfilling in our lives? And the second item there is that big companies are learning to hack us because every click, every choice we make on here is probably being recorded. So they know what your interests are. And because of that, they can hack into us and sell us almost anything if we're not careful. And so therefore we need to learn who we are in almost a Thoreauvian way. We need to rediscover who we are and decide for ourselves who we want to be. Okay, now there are two areas of minimalism that I'm proposing that should be explored a little bit more. Minimalism in communication. If some of you recognize the book on the screen here, The Elements of Style, that is a book that had the teachings of Dr. Strunk in there. Dr. Strunk would stand in front of his classes, I think they were English classes, and he would always preach the idea of omitting needless words. He was a man who believed very much in brevity. And I think today, that's also something that's in short supply. A lot of articles on the web sometimes are written by people who seems like they're just doing it for the sake of volume. They're not really communicating any idea. They're either repeating or they're misrepresenting something because they didn't take the time to study it. So careful communications should be something that we explore in minimalism because otherwise social media is just going to get carried away with endless speed. And here's another word. It's not just possessions we need to reduce. Our virtual possessions also may be accumulating. This is a screenshot from the game called Fortnite. And in my family, one of my cousins has 2 kids who play this every day. They're like the experts in our family on it. They told me that the game is a free download, but if you want to progress faster, you can pay money into the system and accumulate different supplies in the system, like pickaxes and skins to stay warm. So that can be very addictive, and you can accumulate a lot of virtual possessions. All right, another way that I can summarize minimalism today is that our possessions, our cooking, our gaming, it's not about depriving ourselves of these things. It's about what is useful and important to us. This is like a restatement of the priorities that I mentioned earlier. You don't have to reduce anything to 0 because that would be extreme or, in the Stoic sense, ascetic. We don't have to go that far. We just have to decide what's important for us. This family went on the road for a year, and what they gained out of it is they found that time was the most precious thing that their family had. They enjoyed landscapes and found new friends that they would have never had if they just stayed in their home, in a neighborhood. They explored and learned new things, and upon returning home, this is the part that I found very interesting, is they were excited to rejoin their community, and they enjoyed their own backyard more than they did before. Here's a minimalist. He's 29 years old, Rob Greenfield. He has 111 possessions total, and they're all in the picture, I believe, there, if you count them. Some minimalists go on the road, and they're like taking a photo like this, but for me, the question that this begs is how much is the right number of possessions for each? Huh? No, he doesn't. And that actually, thank you, that actually leads into the question, how many possessions is the right number? Well, if you're single or married, it's going to vary. If you're older or younger, there are lots of variations on that. But the goal, again, in minimalism is not just less, less, less. It's less because now you'll have time and resources to choose something different. And so if you can reduce, most of us live in homes or apartments. If we can reduce just a little bit, think of the time you'll spend, the less time you'll spend cleaning Some camping tips, if you haven't thought about this in a while, minimalism is big into camping. There's natural beauty, there's stargazing, sounds of the forest. The last two items I think are particularly good to teach children early on is the value of hard work and respect for wilderness, because I don't think they're going to get that anywhere else. Stargazing, I've done some of this in Hawaii before, but remember that you can travel outside of your city and try some of this. I think that in all the literature I've read, somewhere along the way they said something like, by looking upward, you can actually be looking inward to discover yourself again. All right, I need to quickly cover tiny houses. This is a movement of sorts that's just beginning. If you like the idea of compact living at very low cost, living your values, that is, less stuff, or fulfillment, you can actually build the tiny house yourself. You'll also have the freedom, not only in the philosophical sense, psychological sense, you'll have freedom because the whole house might be moved on a trailer and you can take it somewhere new. It's also environmentally friendly, less time to clean, and very interestingly, the last item there is I've just read in the last month about subscription living in Germany. They have tiny houses where you can live the exact number of days that you need it. There's no leases, there's no mortgages. It reminds me of those bicycles in the inner city that you can rent by the hour. So that's an interesting development. Here's a good quote that I gathered off of Reddit. Every thought, action, choice costs a grain of sand in life's hourglass. I do not know how many grains have yet to fall. I should make sure mine aren't trifling transactions. This comes from the Stoicism thread in the Reddit site. All right, so how do we begin? How do we actually get started in our lives? It seems like it's a big plate in front of us. We have a lot of possibilities. I can tell you I started really by chance. I was one day returning some food to a grocery store. It had gone bad. And I went to the customer service counter, and there was only one person in front of me, and he was gesturing a lot and describing things. He was just returning a package also. And I was watching the minutes pass, and he finally got his refund, and he stepped to the side, and he was putting his money away. And I stepped up to the counter, and she said, "How can I help you?" And I put my package down, and I said, "Bad." And she refunded my money. And the guy next to me had almost been like struck by lightning. He was amazed. Wow, there's this thing called brevity. He learned that day. So that was just a chance happening. But for everyone else, you can pick any of these areas. Adults have a lot of good places that you can start with minimalism, as well as Stoic values, donating some items, revising your grocery list, reading a classic book. That's also on my list there. For kids also, we need to start arranging or rearranging Stoicism and Minimalism to reach kids at an early level. So they need to learn that spending time with family is good, having balance between school and exercise, starting to read a little bit daily, eating healthy, recognizing addictive games, and starting to learn a small footprint early, because we don't want them to, we don't want those kids to end up to be hoarders later in life. Here are some minimalism tips for technology that I've gathered for you. You can turn off the email notification on your phone. I know it's hard to do in the beginning because you're used to hearing this thing ding every now and then and you want to see what email has come in. But by turning it off, I've actually found I have more time to think. You can also forward all your emails to one account if you can do that. Close old email accounts. This tip comes from Tim Ferriss. Don't recognize unrecognized calls where the number is not recognized. You don't have to take it right away. Use voicemail. Put away your phone for 15 minutes a day. And all of this, if you do at least some of these items, you'll find you'll have more time for creative thinking and to find more meaning in your life. So I'm going to end with this quote from Leonardo da Vinci. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Thanks again. That was great.